Here's my no fluff guide to every single Mythic Plus boss in Season 1 of The War Within. Starting with Ara-Kara, the City of Echoes. Starting off with the 3 mini-bosses. They all have an AoE cone that you have to move out of, but they also have one unique ability. The first one, Ixen, casts Horrifying Shrill that does a group fear and damage. Interrupt it. The second one, Nact, casts Call of the Brood, which does heavy AoE damage. And the third one, Attic, casts Poison Cloud. Don't stand in it. The first boss, Avanoxx, is probably the hardest one in the dungeon. Tanks pop a defensive for Voracious Bite. It's big damn. When he casts Gossamer Onslaught, each player will get a swirly underneath them. If you get hit, you take damage and get a stack of a debuff, which at 5 stacks will stun you for 10 seconds. And multiple swirlies will come out during this thing. So what you want to do is loosely stack and move together as a unit around the edge of the room to maximize your space. Healers, get ready for group-wide damage when he casts Alerting Shrill. This shrill also causes eggs around the room to hatch and spawn adds that will fixate random players. And it's super important to kill these before they get close to the boss, because if they do, he'll consume one and get a stack of a 50% damage buff. On to the second boss, Anub'zekt. He'll put a dot up on players called Infestation. If you get it, pop a defensive, it's big damn. And when it expires, it'll summon a moving tornado beneath you. Don't get hit. Kill and interrupt the adds. Don't get hit by the Burrow Charge. Tanks face him away from the party so others don't get hit by the Impale Frontal. At 100 energy, the boss will begin to cast the Eye of the Storm, which will summon a big white circle. Go stand in it. Now this thing will continuously move and your entire party should be inside of it. What you want to do is have the tank on one side for the Impale Frontal and the rest of the group on the other side to avoid being hit. Now for the last boss, Kikatol the Harvester. She'll periodically cast Cultivate Poisons on the group, which will give everybody a poison debuff. When this thing is dispelled or expired, the player will summon 2 globs that travel in 2 different directions. Spread out a little bit so it's easier to dodge, and you probably want to stagger your dispels as well. There's also going to be adds around the room that will drop a puddle whenever they take damage. And these puddles become very important when the boss reaches 100 energy and starts to cast Cosmic Singularity. When this happens, you want to make sure that you don't get pulled into the center of the room by finding a puddle and standing in it. You can also use a movement spell, but if you stand in a puddle, it'll spawn a blob that will root your character. Once Cosmic Singularity finishes, you can either CC or kill your blob to move again. But make sure to pop a defensive when you're standing in a puddle because they will do damage. Don't stand in the swirlies. Now moving on to the City of Threads. Let's start with the first boss. Always stand in the boss's circle. Don't stand in the cone. If you get Shadows of Doubt, 5 orbs will shoot from you. Spread out and position yourself so they're easy to dodge. This can be dispelled as well. Healers, get ready for Indoctrination. It's big group dam. When that ends, tanks, you'll need to move the boss immediately because he'll spawn a growing puddle that everyone needs to avoid. Next up, we have the Fangs of the Queen. Don't stand in the purple beam, the circle, the blue beam, or the puddle. Healers, get ready for Icicles. It's big group dam and leaves a dot that can be dispelled. And when the tank gets the blue circle from Rhyme Dagger, everyone needs to run inside of it. Next up, we have the Coaglamation. Eat the balls, but be careful because they put a healing absorb on you. Don't stand in the puddle. And healers, get ready for Dark Pulse. It's big group dam. Now for the last boss. Don't stand in the swirly. Don't get hit by the moving balls. Healers, get ready for Splice. It's big group dam. Don't stand in the circle. Stun and kill the adds. Kill roots created by the boss's Umbral Weave cast. Tanks, when you get Process of Elimination, move away from other players. And pop a defensive, it's big dam. If you're not the tank, don't stand in the circle. Now for the next dungeon, we have the Dawnbreaker. Starting with the first boss, Speaker Shadecrown. Don't get hit by the spinning lasers. If you get Collapsing Night, run to the edge of the boat to drop your portal away from other players. Healers, be ready when you dispel Burning Shadows because it puts a healing absorb on the entire party. Tanks, pop a defensive for Obsidian Blast. It's big damn. And at 50 and 0%, fly off and around the boat until the Shadow Explosion goes off. Next up, we have Anub'ikajj. If you get the Dark Orb, aim it down a clear path away from the group because it explodes when it hits something and it does less damage the further it travels. If you get the Terrifying Slam, move away from other players. And pop a defensive. It's big damn and knocks you back. Healers, get ready for Shadow Decay. It's big group dam. And kill the adds. Now for the last boss. There are 2 sides to the acid wave, the flat side and the tube side. The wave will always travel down the flat side, so you want to move until your group is on the tube side. Just remember, tube side, safe side. Healers, get ready for Corrosive Spray. It's big group dam. Don't stand in the swirly. When the barrels come out, grab one, run to the boss, and throw it at him to start the next phase. During this phase, the boss will fly to this part of the map and you have to chase after him. But you have to make sure that your Radiant Light debuff doesn't expire. otherwise you get one shot. Just use your skywriting abilities and fly into the golden orbs to extend its duration. When you land, make sure to interrupt the acidic eruption cast. When you get the white circle, run away from the group to drop your web. Then move out of the web to break it, which will do some party-wide damage. And don't stand in the puddles. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as phase 1 and the fight ends at 60%. Moving on to the next dungeon, we have Grim Batol. Starting with the first boss. When he casts Commanding Roar, move to the clear part of the room so you don't get hit by the dragons. If you get Rock Spike, drop it at the edge of the room. It knocks you up and leaves behind a puddle that you don't want to stand in. Tanks pop a defensive for Skull Splitter. It's big damn. Next, we have Forgemaster Throngus. This boss equips different weapons throughout the fight, which give him different abilities. For his axe, dodge the fiery cleave frontal and don't stand in the puddles. These last throughout the fight, so tanks take him toward an edge of the room and have everyone stand along that edge to bait them in the same area. For his swords, tanks pop a defensive for Molten Flurry. It's big damn. If you get Molten Spark, pop a defensive and run to the edge of the room to drop your puddle. For his mace, tanks, his melee hits will do big damn, so you want to kite him around the room until he swaps weapons again. And he also drops puddles during this, so kite him accordingly. Next, we have Drahga Shadowburner. Slow, stun, and kill the ad. If it targets you, make sure to not get hit. Interrupt the Shadow Flame Bolt cast, and if you get the Curse of Entropy, you can remove it via a Dispel, healing, or movement freeing ability. When he reaches 0, he'll hop on a dragon and start phase 2. Now you'll get 2 ads instead of 1. Don't get knocked off the platform or into an ad from the Twilight Buffet cast. Tanks face the boss away from the group for the Devouring Flame Frontal Cone, and the fight ends at 50%. Now for the last boss. Don't stand in the tentacles. Stand in the clear part of the room when the boss casts Shadow Gale. When this happens, a few players are going to get a purple circle around them from Abyssal Corruption. If that's you, pop a defensive and make sure that no one's in your circle. Kill the ads. Tanks pop a defensive for Crush, it's big damn, and knocks you back. Then it's just rinse and repeat. Next up, we have the Mists of Tirna Scythe dungeon. Let's start with the first boss, Ingra. Ingra is the main boss, and Droman is this tree thing that he has mind controlled. DPS Droman down to 20% to break the mind control. When that happens, he'll turn friendly, stun Ingra, and make him take more damage. Then swap to Ingra and pop Lust and cooldowns. After 12 seconds, Droman heals back up, and you'll need to DPS him down again. Then it's just rinse and repeat. Don't stand in the swirlies, don't stand in the puddles, interrupt Ingra's Spirit Bolt cast, and don't stand in Droman's Sparkly Cone. For the next boss, we have Mistcaller. Don't get hit by the dodgeballs. There will be arrows on the boss that show their direction. If you get targeted by Freeze Tag, run away from the fox. Tanks, make sure to interrupt Patty Cake. It's big damn and no one else can interrupt it. At 70, 40, and 10%, the boss will clone itself. Each clone will have a symbol above its head, and your goal is to kill the one that doesn't match the others. Do this quickly because during this phase, the boss pulses AoE damage that increases over time. Be careful though, because if you kill the wrong clone, it's a one-shot. Now for the last boss, Tred'ova. If you get Mind Link, run away from other players to break the chain. Don't stand in the swirlies, don't stand in the puddles, kill the ads. Interrupt the Parasitic Incapacitation cast, and healers, get ready for Expulsion. It's big damn. Moving on to the Necrotic Wake dungeon. Starting with the first boss, Blightbone. If you get Heaving Wretch, aim it away from other players, and pop a defensive. It's big damn. If you don't have it, find out who does, and make sure you're away from them. It also spawns worms that fixate on players. Don't get hit by these, stun, and kill them. Don't stand in the green circle. Don't stand in the puddle. Tanks, this boss is all about maximizing your space, so try and overlap the puddles dropped by the boss as much as possible. Also, pop a defensive for Crunch, it's big damn. Next up, we have Amarth the Harvester. Interrupt the Necrotic Bolt cast. Stun and kill the ads. Interrupt the Frostbolt Volley cast from the mages, and make sure that all of the ads go down before Final Harvest is cast. Otherwise, it's big damn. If you have a Soothe, use it on the boss's Necrotic Frenzy, don't stand in the swirly, and don't get hit by the Necrotic Breath. Up next, we have Surgeon Stitch Flesh. If you get Stitch Needle, pop a defensive, it's a big bleed. Don't stand in the puddle. Tanks, pop a defensive for Mutilate, it's big damn. If you get the Meat Hook, you'll want to put yourself in between the Abomination and Stitch Flesh. Wait for the Abomination to start casting, then move out so he hooks Stitch Flesh instead of you. Once Stitch Flesh gets hooked down, focus damage onto him. If you get Morbid Fixation, run away from Stitch Flesh. Whoever gets the next Meat Hook can hit Stitch Flesh with it to stun him out of this. After a while, Stitch Flesh will jump back up to the platform, and it's just rinse and repeat. But he will summon another ad, so make sure you get the first one down ASAP. Now for the last boss. If you get Frozen Binds, other players need to move out of your circle. Then use a Dispel or movement freeing ability to get rid of it. Make sure that no one's in your circle though, because it will spread to other players inside upon removal. When he casts Comet Swarm, keep moving to dodge the onslaught of Swirlies. If you get exiled, dodge Swirlies, run to the end of the platform, and interrupt and kill the ad so you can be returned to your group. Next up, we have the Siege of Boralis dungeon. Let's start with the first boss. Don't stand in the swirlies, kill the ads. Tanks, make sure to grab the ads and face the cleaver away from the group. If you get targeted with On the Hook, run away from the boss and and kite him into one of the bombs to stun him. Tanks, if a bomb is about to explode and it's not being used to kite the boss into it, either pop a defensive and soak it or kite one of the adds into it. Next, we have Dread Captain Lockwood. Tanks, stay in melee range, otherwise she'll do heavy damage to random targets. Make sure to face the boss away from the group and don't get hit by the clear the deck frontal. Healers, get ready for Fiery Ricochet, it's big damn. When she casts Fiery Bombardment, everyone spawns circles underneath them for a few seconds. Don't get hit and try and move as a group to avoid trapping other players. At 66 and 33%, she will summon adds and swirlies. Kill the adds, don't stand at the beam, and don't get hit by the swirlies. Once the Cannoneer add dies, pick up the cannon and shoot it at the boss to end the phase. Next up, we have Hadal Dark Fathom. Don't stand in the swirlies. Don't stand in the puddles. Tanks, face the boss away from the group and don't get hit by the Breakwater frontal swirlies. When he casts Tidal Surge, 2 lines of waves will spawn. Hide behind the statue in the middle of the room to not get hit by the first wave. Then move to the other side to avoid getting hit by the second. But make sure to stay away from the statue for the rest of the fight because you don't want puddles spawning there to block your path. And don't stand near the edge of the room before the waves come up because they can spawn on top of you. Now for the last boss. Don't stand in the swirlies. Kill the tentacles, but focus the Demolisher ones down first. Tanks, make sure to be in melee range of these, otherwise they do big damn. Kill the other tentacle to free the engineer so he can repair the cannon. When it's repaired, shoot the cannon, don't stand in the circle and move clockwise to the next cannon. Do not go in the water. If you swim for too long, a tentacle will one-shot you. If you get putrid waters, make sure that no one is in your circle and dispel it. If you don't get dispelled, pop a defensive. It's big damn. And finally, we have the Stonevault. Starting with the first boss, E.D.N.A. Don't stand in the circle because a spike is about to spawn there. If you get an arrow, line it up with the spike to break it. But healers be ready because the group will get a stacking dot. At 100 energy, the boss will do a slam that does some group-wide damage and breaks any spikes that are still up. The more spikes, the more damage, so make sure to break every spike before this goes out. Tanks, pop a defensive first Seismic Smash, it's big damn. And when this is dispelled, the tank will get a 6-second damage reduction, so healers, you can wait to dispel this if you need to. Next up, we have Skarmorak. Don't stand in the swirlies. Kill the adds that spawn around the room, but not all at once because when they die, they do big group dam and put a stacking debuff on everyone. When the boss casts Fortify, they'll start eating all the crystals that are still alive and will gain a shield based on how many they eat. And when he has this shield, he'll do group-wide damage that increases over time, so you want to break it as soon as possible. To deal with this, you can run into a Shadow Orb that'll give you a stacking, healing, and damage buff. Just don't eat too many because they also do some damage to you, and you want to leave like 1 or 2 for the healer so they can deal with the damage during this phase. Next, we have the Master Machinists. There's Dorlita, who's in a mech suit, and Brock, who's a regular dwarf. Now, the most important thing about this fight is that you have to kill both of them at the same time, otherwise they'll enrage and do big dam. Besides that, interrupt molten metal from Brock, it does big group dam. Don't stand in the puddles. When a boss jumps away, don't be in the middle of the room because they're about to throw a big metal box down it. If it's Dorlita, make sure you find one of the clear vents to stand in because they'll explode the box and send out some lava waves, and that vent will be your safe spot. If you get lava expulsion, don't get hit by the big lava ball that's being aimed at you, but you can aim this at puddles to clear them. And tanks, pop a defensive for Molten Hammer, it's big damn. Now for the last boss. If you get a purple circle around you, run to an edge of the room to drop your puddle. Don't get hit by the cone. If you get Void Corruption, you'll get a dot that does increasing damage over time, and you want to clear this by running close to a void portal. But be careful, because doing so will clear the portal, and if you happen to touch it, it's a one-shot. And that's it. You should be good to go. Now please keep in mind, this is not meant to be a comprehensive guide, rather just something quick and easy that you can watch during the ready check and not die. Hope this helps.